All right, here we are, and we're building this around. Again, I'm gonna iron. Move that out of the way for a minute. I always find, I'm not sure if you have any tips or tricks on getting your seams all ironed up, but I always have to put my finger there and then kind of glide along. So there we are. Lay that flat. Now eventually I might cut some of this off. So it's always going to be a little bit bigger than I intend. And they have some lovely templates that you can use if you wanted to make this, particular shape. Now I want to work along this side, and you see that this is a little too long. So all I'm going to do is just kind of shape that up again. Take my ruler and kind of shape it up. What we're doing is we're just adding over time, and before we add more or the next layer or color of fabric, we're just making sure, oops, my thread's in there. We're just making sure that we have a nice even edge, a nice smooth edge on there. And we can add whatever color, whatever length we want. The next one that I'm going to do, and then I'm going to probably do a yellow one after, is this color with this just little flowers and things. So it's not going to be as beautifully matched up as the last time, but I'm going to go ahead and line this up. And I'm going to make sure it lines up over here, but again, that also doesn't really matter right now. I find like it's easier to use pieces that are more squared off, we'll say, and have straight lines where there are a lot of like curvy. I wouldn't necessarily use anything like this. I would cut it off, or even triangles. So technically I could actually just sew along here and have it come on this side, which I may get to in a little while. But for right now, I'm trying to just surround my little bunny shape with fabric all the way around, almost in kind of a log cabin quilt block method. So I'm going to take this, and then you'll see me back again in just a minute once I finish hand sewing that. All right, so we're moving right along with our little bunny. Isn't that looking pretty? It's got all these little rectangles kind of connected together, and I'm still doing this exclusively hand sewing. So now I want to cut this one off. Now don't discard these little pieces. You might actually want to add them on. And so far we are just working with rectangles. So I'm going to save that little piece. Might, have to iron them. And now I want to do this little yellow color. I'm trying to think. Oh, actually, that was the back. Oh, I kind of like the back. But I think that this ties in nicely. So maybe I think I'm going to have the dragonflies flying that way across. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of center that. Yes, it does not extend. So far it's just going to be here. So that I'm okay with that, because I know I'm going to be cutting some of the pieces off on here. Actually, that's going to make it a little bit more narrow, because if I am going to have to then cut along, I'm going to be giving up a lot of this fabric. So I think for the sake of that, I'm going to actually I'm going to cut this off because I wanted to focus a little bit more. This is where some of the fussy cutting comes in. I'm glad you're seeing me struggle through this process and how I move through it, because again, I know what I want to make, but I wanted to show you this process authentically so that if you get into it, you realize there is some risk in here. This is kind of new and wild. So I like that. It's a little bit wonky, but I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to hand sew this and then come back, and we're just going to keep building it out. While I'm here though, I feel like we haven't sewn together too much. So let's do that a little bit. Let's chat about that idea of the wild. I read this article about a woman who would just go and paint outside, out into there, and just let herself, put her hand into her paint box and grab out paints. And it was just it felt at random, but there kind of was a process to it. And then she would just paint in the outside and just see what unfolded. And that just kind of helped her refocus into her environment and kind of be a little bit more present and connected to the world. Because there is this sense of us being so disconnected. Engaging with technology is not engaging with in a tactile way, and there's beautiful, wonderful technologies. I mean, we're using YouTube to share and communicate different ideas like this. But then there's just really no replacement for engaging in the natural world, whether it be sewing or painting or just taking a walk. But this idea of wild creativity, she writes, a sense of sacred connection comes from actively experiencing the wild creative self. It is the experience of the dance between the inner and the outer, the mind and the body, the self and the planet, if you will. This dance takes place in the liminal space that is the creative act. We've talked about the liminal space before. We can come to better know ourselves and the wild in a joyful, renewing way when we enter this dance. Transformation of the self and the planet need not be agonizing and analytical. It can be celebratory. Creation that affirms the inner wisdom and the inner connection of all beings. And maybe it could be that transformation for you, but maybe it's really just giving you time and space to connect with yourself and learn something new about yourself. What colors do you select? What fabrics do you touch and feel a little sense of excitement? What symbols or patterns do you find that you connect with? Are there fabrics that you select from pieces that you're in your closet you just want to repurpose? This is our sense of creative play, and we don't get enough time to do that because we think we can't if we aren't doing something that in our minds has value and purpose, like doing the laundry. Of course, we have to do those things. Of course, we have to cook for our family, and we do have to work and grade papers. We have all those things to do. But sometimes we think that we don't have time to engage in creative play. But, we just have to be creative with where we find it and when we do it. And I feel like it's been a life's priority for me. I am a creative, and I need this for my own health and sanity. And I need to do new things. Keeps me feeling alive. So here's this, and I'm going to go ahead and trim off the next pieces. We've surrounded our bunny. And I'm going to keep working through this until I get to it the size that I want. And I'll stop and show you. This may end up being 2 separate videos, I'm thinking, because I also want to show you not just rectangles, but what could it look like if we decided to do an angled section. But first I'm just going to go ahead and clean this up so I can continue working on it. Okay, so this is about where I am, and this kind of was a happy accident, and look at what I ended up. It looks like our little bunny is inside of a home, and it's kind of sheltered. And so in this creative play, I have put my symbol of vulnerability and my little bunny in there, and I have surrounded him with her with a home and shelter and care. So I love how symbolic that kind of turned out. It wasn't my plan, but I think that that's what happens when you allow yourself the freedom to just play. So what I'm going to do now is decide kind of how far I want to go. I'm going to make myself something called a mug rug. And so what I'm going to do is kind of make it a long rectangle, and it's going to be a place where I can sit my mug and then a little treat or something down there, crackers, whatever, as I'm studying. And I'll keep in mind my little bunny, and it will be a good remember. But I want to make sure that I get deep up, so I think I like it coming above this little circle. So the convenience of this is that I can see. Oops, and I had it upside down. So I can actually see where my seam needs to be and make sure that that is on the other side of it so that it doesn't get lost in there. So I'm going to cut this. And then I only had pieces for this far. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select some other new pieces, a new fabric to go on the side, on either side, and then maybe a little bit more on the bottom. And then I'll come back and show you what I have made and how we can kind of clean this up. You can already see I did kind of clean this up a little bit, and it's made, you know, it's not perfect, but again, this was play. So I like how that came together. Again, I have my little symbol. It ended up being in a house. Look at this, night and day. You know, I could come up with all sorts of different symbolism for this, and maybe I'll talk about that for next week. But look at how organic it came. And yes, it's a little bit kind of wrinkly, but once I get this attached to a backing piece of fabric and maybe even have like some quilting batting in between the two, which I'm going to need if this is a mug rug, then that's going to kind of smooth out a little bit. But that's where we're going to end for today, and we'll get into more or less utility stitching and more decorative stitching as we kind of come in and look at these different seams. I've got some space on the side here, and we'll talk about all sorts of different creative ways that we can play with this piece. And then again, this is going to be something I'm going to use because it'll be something I see every day. And so because I hand stitched it and I had play, it might be a visual reminder to do this more often, or, you know, just give me a happy sense if I'm having a bad day. Reminding myself, well, you can feel like that little bunny, vulnerable, but you have all these structures and things outside. So delve into it, make it as meaningful as you want, or just be creative with the fabrics that you choose. Looking forward to seeing what you create and share, and I will see you next week when we get back at it.